Light, nimble and extrovert, the NissanJuke was the original small Super Mini-derived crossover model, combining attitude, irreverence, modish style and energy with a mischievous sense of fun. Since its original launch, plenty of would-be rivals have attempted to copy its concept, prompting Nissan to introduce a whole series of improvements to try and ensure continued segment leadership. As before, the results certainly won't appeal to everyone, but then that's because it isn't supposed to. It's aimed at the young and the young at heart, many of whom will continue to love this car and admire its designers for having the courage to do something different. Very different.
There's nothing quite like a NissanJuke. Part SUV, part sports coupe, part hot hatch, with a few biker and rally car genes thrown in for good measure. It sounds an unpromising mix, but against the odds, Nissan has made it work and, in this car, defined once and for all what the market's smallest breed of crossover class car should be like. Here's the improved version. If you're familiar with this model, then you'll probably be thinking that this revised first-generation design doesn't look much different. But then why would it? Changing a winning formula is always a risky thing to do. And this car certainly represents quite a success story. Yet another for Nissan in the crossover segment. 500,000 sales since the original launch in 2010, making this the company's second biggest selling model, with over 85% of buyers new to the brand. These people love this car, reckoning it to be fun to look at, fun to drive and fun to own. They've not been shy though in telling its maker how it could be improved. A bigger boot was most wanted, along with a less jiggly ride and a more efficient entry-level petrol power plant. With this revised version, launched in the summer of 2014, Nissan has addressed all of these concerns, as well as adding detailed styling changes, extra personalization options, and the option of a clever Google-linked multimedia system. As updates go, this is a pretty thorough one. Which is just as well, because since this model's original introduction, a whole raft of fresh competitors have arrived in this growing Super Mini-based crossover segment. Most notably cars like Renault's Captur, Peugeot's 2008 and Ford's EcoSport, all of them seeking to replicate this Duke's special appeal amongst extrovert, vibrant, youthful, energetic and independent folk. In the face of such competition, can the original still prove to be the best? Let's find out. Dynamically, the Duke has a wider brief to fulfill than the usual one allotted to a small crossover model of this kind. As well as competing with lifestyle-oriented SUV-style super minis like Renault's Captur and Peugeot's 2008, it must also appeal to extrovert, style-conscious buyers who might otherwise buy something sportier, a Citroën DS3 perhaps, or maybe a Mini. That means it has to handle, which is quite an ask for something nearly 1.6 metres in height and weighing over 1.3 tonnes. Still, as you begin to realise when throwing this Duke around the country lanes, the cleverness of modern engineering means that unpromising statistics like these can still be converted into a car that delivers a satisfying steer. Nissan has had to adopt a pretty stiff setup to make it all work, but it's a bearable compromise, especially now that the suspension is a little more supple in mainstream models, creating a car that rides not too badly around town, yet rolls surprisingly little through tighter bends. And you can adjust its demeanour to suit either environment thanks to the setting that lie behind this D-Mode button here, gateway to NDCS, the Nissan Dynamic Control System that's standard on all but the humblest Duke models. Tap it and the ventilation buttons change suddenly to option switches that enable you to flip between eco, normal and sport modes. Sport, as you might expect, offers weightier steering and sharper throttle response. You can monitor via a power curve pie chart displayed on this screen. In normal, the eagerness vanishes and the screen displays a torque indicator, while in eco, the throttle opening is reduced and an economy meter displayed. Personally, I'd have traded all this gadgetry for a slightly slicker gear change and a slightly more feelsome electric power steering. But you can't deny that NDCS is a fun toy to play with, at least initially. And echoing Nissan's GTR supercar, it even has a G-force meter showing acceleration, braking and cornering forces. What's important though, at the end of the day, is even if you forget all this frippery, this car really does drive as its looks suggest it should, or at least most variants do. To be honest, the entry-level baseline 1.6-litre petrol versions aren't going to offer you a particularly rewarding dynamic experience, whether you choose the 94 PS manual gearbox model or the 117 PS CVT automatic. A much better option, if you can stretch to it, is the higher tech 115 PS 1.2-litre DIGT petrol power plant, whose introduction really is the headline news with this revised first-generation design. It's a unit that works well in Nissan's larger Qashqai crossover, so as you can imagine, it feels even better in a little Juke, sprinting to 62 miles per hour in 10.8 seconds on the way to 111 miles per hour, at the same time as returning efficiency figures that are a match for far feebler petrol rivals. The other mainstream Juke option is the single 1.5-litre DCI diesel model, the car that I'm driving here. Its engine isn't especially quiet, but it is a pleasing and torquey unit, 260 newton meters of pulling power, leaving it capable of 62 miles per hour from rest in 11.2 seconds, en route to 112 miles per hour. Is that enough to cash the sporty check the looks of this car appear to write? If you're unconvinced, then your Nissan dealership will direct you to one of the top models equipped with the 1.6-litre DIGT turbocharged petrol power and good for at least 190 PS, which means the car will be good for 62 miles per hour from rest in just 7.8 seconds on the way to 134 miles per hour. The thought of putting such an engine into anything small and SUV-like seems unwise on paper, but in one of these pokier Jukes results in a concoction that one writer once likened to a kind of shrunken SUV sports car in super springy trainers. That about sums it up, I think. Of course, some like their trainers to be more super springy than others, which is why the same 1.6-litre DIGT petrol turbo power plant I've been talking about has been tuned to 200 PS for a sportier Nismo version, marginally improving those figures in a package that adds 10% stiffer springs and more direct steering. And a further slight performance increase is possible if you opt for the flagship Nismo RS variant, which ups power to 215 PS and includes a mechanical limited slip differential on two-wheel drive models. Ah yes, two-wheel drive. It's a non-negotiable feature across almost the entire Juke range, which seems a bit odd when this car's big wheels and tall stance seem to suggest to all the world that it's just completed a stage of the Paris-Dakar Rally. You can, though, get Nissan's all-mode 4x4i system on the top 1.6-litre DIGT turbo petrol models I've just been talking about, provided you don't mind the fact that such an all-wheel drive setup must conditionally be rather uncomfortably paired with a 6-speed CVT automatic gearbox. This dents the performance and generally takes away much of this car's youthful sportiness as part of a package that costs rather a lot of money. Which is why most buyers ignore that flagship variant, recognising that the natural habitat of their Juke will be in Surbiton and not Snowdon, an environment in which four-wheel drive is pretty unnecessary and through which this car can cruise happily over speed humps and poor road surfaces, thanks to its high ground clearance and large tyres. That ground clearance, in fact 180mm in most models, is enough to make this car a reasonably effective tool on rough roads and forest tracks, provided that the right rubber is fitted. But it's really designed for the urban jungle, where it fits in just fine. Whether you like its looks or not, what you can't deny is that this car continues to make more of a style statement than any other remotely family-friendly five-door you can buy for sensible money. Encountering a Juke for the first time gives you the feeling of meeting something from a movie. Disney Pixar's Cars film, perhaps. You almost expect the gaping, exaggerated grille to open up at any moment and Owen Wilson to say something cheeky. But bringing you back to earth with a bump is the realization that despite its beach buggy shape, this car is actually based on the same dull underpinnings as a conventional Renault Clio or Nissan Micra. Still, many movie stars come from humble beginnings, and with this model, the designers have made the very most of them. Stylistically, it's a tale of two halves. The bottom section of the car, all SUV, with its bulging wheel arches and lower bodywork that emerges from underneath, resembling underbody protection. Above the waistline, though, the sports car DNA shines through, almost as if Nissan had bolted the top half of its GTR Super Coupe to the bottom half of the Qashqai crossover and then shrunk the resulting concoction in the wash. This improved model gets a revised front grille incorporating the smarter V-shape found on the brand's other models, but around it the same delicious design details remain. Take the side lights and indicators that burst up through slashes on the bodywork, or headlights that are modelled on rally car fog lamps from the 60s and come redesigned in this revised Juke to incorporate LED daytime running lights and the option of xenon bulbs. Like the door mirrors with their LED side turn indicators, these can be ordered with colour-coded finishing. Also personalisable through a choice of colours are the trim panels on the restyled bumpers you'll find at the front and here at the rear. Just above, which is below the integrated rear spoiler, the Nissan's 370 sports car style boomerang-shaped rear lights now also include LED technology for a distinctive nighttime signature. It's just as interesting inside, though there are no expensive soft-touch plastics used you don't really notice, such as the design exuberance. Take the centre console from which the gear lever protrudes, modelled to resemble the top of a superbike's fuel tank and finished in either red or grey high-gloss paint. The instruments too look like that of a bike's, with twin clocks shrouded by heavy cowls. Even the door armrests, shaped like flippers used by scuba divers, are supposed to reflect an active outlook. As a driver, you sit higher up than in an ordinary Super Mini, which helps when parking. The wingtop lights at each corner of the bonnet acting as good positioning guides. And it's reasonably easy to get comfortable, a height-adjustable seat compensating for the fact that the leather-covered steering wheel still, unfortunately, only just for height, not for reach. On the plus side, though, I like the way this rubberized pad in front of the gear lever firmly holds your mobile phone in place, locating it conveniently by the USB and aux in ports. And personalisation's great, isn't it? The package I mentioned earlier that you get with plusher models allows you to colour coordinate the centre console, the door finishers, the air vent rings, and even the stitching of the gear knob, the steering wheel, the seats, and the instrument binnacle covers. Choose from black, red, white, or yellow finishes, or mix and match the colours to your own taste. And at the back, well, the rear door handles are disguised in an attempt to create a coupe-like look. And once you use them, the door openings are a little narrow. Once inside, though, you'll find that the dimensions Nissan has chosen, which see this car very slightly longer and wider than a conventional Super Mini, certainly creates something that a small family could conceivably just about live with. Though the rear bench doesn't slide, it does offer a reasonable standard of leg and shoulder room. Although tall teenagers might find their headroom a little restricted by the tapering roof. As for the boot, well, that's probably the biggest story with this revised first generation model. Its tiny size was the biggest issue owners had with the original version of this car, and the biggest reason potential buyers had to ignore this model. So, Nissan's design team, well, they went to work, changing the shape of the trunk area to improve capacity by a massive 40% to 354 litres. Now, the Japanese brand calls this class leading, which isn't quite true, as it's still not quite as much as you'd get from potential rivals like Renault's Captur or Skoda's Yeti. But the improvements do now put this Juke's boot on par with the likes of rivals Peugeot 208, Ford's EcoSport, Kia Soul and Citroën C4 Cactus. And it's about 25% bigger than the space you'll get in a 5-door mini hatch. You can make good use of the space too, thanks to a 2-stage luggage area floor. And if that's not enough, then pushing forward the 60-40 split folding rear bench opens up a flat loading space increased in size from 830 to 1,189 litres. One word of warning though, the cargo area changes apply only to 2-wheel drive Juke models. The tiny percentage of buyers who opt for one of the top 4-wheel drive variants will find the luggage area just as restricted as before. So 207 litres with the seats up and 786 litres with them folded. Most Juke models sell in the £13,500 to £17,000 bracket, but you can theoretically pay up to £24,000 for one. The range starts with the older tech 94 PS 1.6 litre petrol engine from the original model lineup. But most will want to avoid this and opt for either the more powerful and efficient 115 PS 1.2 DIGT petrol unit or the frugal 110 PS 1.5 litre DCI diesel, both requiring a budget of around £15,500. Bear in mind that the personalisation options many will want only really start from the mid-range Ascenta Premium trim upwards. That's the spec I have here. At which point you'll probably be spending £17,000 or more on your Juke. Moving further up the range, very few customers for this car choose the pokey 1.6 litre DIGT petrol turbo models as they're quite pricey. But at this level there is plenty of choice. The standard 190 PS two-wheel drive manual version starts at around £18,000, but for extra premiums of around £2,500 and just over £3,500 respectively, buyers can choose more focused and pokier Nismo and Nismo RS variants that respectively put out either 200 or 215 PS. Whichever 1.6 litre DIGT Juke model you choose, there's the £2,200 premium of 4-wheel drive, a layout which has to be had with the brand's Xtronic CVT automatic transmission. If you want an auto box on this car but don't need 4-wheel drive and lots of power, then a self-shifter is available with a 117 PS version of the old normally aspirated petrol 1.6, priced from just over £16,000. The wide range of model, transmission and engine options I've just mentioned is one of the things that marks this Nissan out from a number of its direct rivals in the smallest super mini derived segment of the crossover market. Go for either a Renault Captur or a Peugeot 2008 crossover model, for example, and you'll find that virtually all the variants on offer put out no more than around 90 PS. Yet most of them cost around the same or even slightly more than their Juke equivalents. There are pokier engine choices if you widen your choice of competitors to consider, say, a Ford EcoSport or a Citroën C4 Cactus. But then you're looking at a price tag around 10% higher. Kia Soul might be worth a look too. In cheap entry-level petrol form, it's good value, but further up the range, it's another small crossover that lists at about 10% more than this Nissan, and its bigger 1.6 litre engine will cost significantly more to run. There aren't too many other direct alternatives. Cars in this segment like the Mini Countryman and the Skoda Yeti will typically cost around 15% more than a Juke, though they are a little bigger inside. And other small crossovers, models like Vauxhall's Mokka and Jeep's Renegade, can be even pricier than that, while effectively not really offering very much more than is on the table here. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is a Juke you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Nissan has been with the standard equipment tally. And the answer is that there's a reasonable amount of kit included across the range. Though it's a pity you have to pay extra for a space-saver spare wheel to replace a standard tyre repair kit, you'll be cursing should you ever get stranded by the roadside. Otherwise, though, there's not much to gripe about, with even entry-level Vizia variants getting 16-inch alloy wheels, daytime running lights, all-round electric windows, air conditioning, a decent quality CD stereo with an aux-in socket, the useful flexi-floor boot board and driver's seat height adjustment. The next trim level up, Ascenta, introduces the desirable 1.2-litre DIGT petrol engine alongside the ordinary petrol and diesel options, as well as adding niceties like front fog lamps, cruise control with a speed limiter, Bluetooth, climate control, and the neat Nissan dynamic control system that changes the driving behaviour of the car via eco, normal and sport modes. Ideally, though, you'd want a budget for this car that would enable you to stretch up to the mid-range Ascenta Premium trim level that I have here. One of the main reasons why is that it's only from this level upwards that buyers get the Nissan Design Studio Personalisation Interior package that really makes this car and allows you to create your own unique-looking Juke. You get a choice of 4 colours: black, red, white or yellow, that can be used on various interchangeable interior and exterior parts. Inside, these include the centre console, the door finishers, the air vent rings, and even the stitching of the gear knob, the steering wheel, the seats and the instrument binnacle cover. Outside, you can colour change the door mirror covers, the headlamp finishers and trim panels on front and rear bumpers. The other incentive to push your budget up to Ascenta Premium trim is that it's only from this level that the clever Nissan Connect infotainment system is standard with its neat 5.8-inch colour touchscreen. Via this, you not only get satellite navigation and a reverse parking camera, but you've also got the opportunity to specify the extra cost safety shield and a round view monitor technologies that are optional at this level and standard at the top of the range. So how do they work? Well, the around view monitor simplifies parking by combining the feeds from small cameras mounted on the front grille, both door mirrors and the tailgate to create an overhead 360-degree helicopter view image that displays on the Connect dashboard infotainment screen that I just mentioned. The tailgate camera also provides further parking assistance via the Safety Shield Setup's moving object detection system, alerting you to oncoming traffic or pedestrians when you're reversing out of a space. As part of Safety Shield, the same camera also provides a blind spot warning function that will alert you to the danger of a potential collision when changing lanes, and a lane departure warning system to stop dozy drivers from veering out of their lanes on a highway. A clever little camera then, that even has its own wash and blow dry system to keep its image clear. Even without all this gadgetry fitted, the Juke can be classified as a very safe place to put your family, according at least to Euro NCAP, who gave it a top 5-star rating in their tests. All models get twin front, side and curtain airbags, plus ISOFIX child seat fastenings and tyre pressure monitoring, as well as the usual electronic aids for braking, traction and stability control. Finally, I'll mention that top versions come with a couple of desirable options: xenon headlamps and an open-air glass roof that floods the cabin with light. Lovely. The The original version of this car had many appealing virtues, but it wasn't among the more efficient cars of its kind. That was mainly because of the old tech 1.6-litre petrol unit that budget considerations forced most buyers into choosing. It's a power plant that still continues in 94 PS price-leading guise, as well as in 117 PS form for those who want the CVT automatic gearbox. Your Nissan salesperson, though, will probably be urging you to ignore both of these alternatives and instead look at a much more efficient option, the 115 PS turbocharged 1.2 DIGT petrol engine that's been introduced with this improved model. You can see why, with the old 94 PS 1.6 beneath the bonnet, this Juke manages 47.1 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 138 grams per kilometre of CO2, making it nearly 20% costlier to run than some obvious rivals. And with returns of 44.8 miles per gallon and 145 grams per kilometre, the automatic 1.6 CVT version fares even worse. Switch, though, to the new tech 115 PS 1.2 DIGT variant, and it's a very different story here. You'll manage 50.4 miles per gallon and 129 grams per kilometre, which is right back on the pace in this segment. Similar, for example, to Ford's EcoSport 1-litre T EcoBoost, despite the Nissan's sprightlier performance. So, to some extent anyway, the mainstream element of this car's petrol proposition has been sorted out. And as for diesel, well, there was never really anything very much wrong on that score. This car uses the same 1.5-litre DCI unit as you'll find in the rival Renault Captur, but here you get it in a slightly pokier 110 PS tune rather than as a 90 PS unit. The result is a little more performance than you'd get in an equivalent Captur, but a slight impact on efficiency. Expect 70.6 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 104 grams per kilometre of CO2. Figures that are about the same as those you'll achieve at the wheel of a feebler Peugeot 2008 1.6e HDI 92. And about 20% better than you'd manage in base diesel versions of rivals like Ford's EcoSport, Skoda's Yeti and Kia's Soul. Move up the Juke range to the performance-minded 1.6 DIGT petrol turbo models, and you will of course have to make a few running cost compromises. The standard 190 PS version manages 47.1 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 139 grams per kilometre of CO2. Figures that fall to about 40.9 miles per gallon and 159 grams per kilometre if you go for the pokier, more focused 200 PS Nismo version. If you want your Juke 1.6 DIGT with the four-wheel drive and Xtronic Auto gearbox package, then the figures are 43.5 miles per gallon and 153 grams per kilometre for the standard 190 model and 38.2 miles per gallon and 169 grams per kilometre for the 200 PS Nismo variant. Of course, the driver can play his or her part too in keeping running costs down. For a start, the figures I've quoted assume selection of the Nissan Dynamic Control System's Eco mode. Here, the throttle opening is reduced and an economy meter displayed. It's also possible to log your eco driving success via bar graphs. You can do more though. If you're in a plusher variant fitted with the Nissan Connect infotainment screen and its clever Eco Score system, this scores the efficiency of your driving at the end of each trip in terms of three factors: pull away, deceleration and cruise, also providing a graphical history of your green friendliness to date. If you've got the Connect set up, then you'll also have a sat-nav system with so-called eco-routing, a feature that sees it able to calculate the route likely to use the least fuel. Insurance costing should be reasonably competitive too. For petrol models, there's an opening rating of Group 8 for the 1.6-litre petrol variant, rising to a rating that'll sit between Groups 11 and 13 if you choose one of the preferable 1.2 DIGT versions. Choose one of the mainstream sporty 1.6 DIGT petrol models and your car will be rated somewhere between Groups 19 and 21. As for this 1.5 DCI diesel, well, you're looking at a rating somewhere between groups 12 and 15. What else? Well, servicing is every year or every 12,500 miles. As for depreciation, due in no small part to this car's distinctive personality, its residual values are a few points beefier than in many typical trendy small runabouts, provided you don't go too extreme with one of the personalisation colour packs. Independent specialists Cap Monitor reckon that after the standard 3-year, 60,000 mile ownership period, your Juke should still be worth between 52 and 54% of what you originally paid for it, a showing that even outstrips a mini hatch by a good few points. The Juke was always a clever idea, launched by Nissan to offer SUV-like style for the small car sector without any SUV-like compromises. Precisely the same trick the company's bigger Qashqai crossover had already pulled off in targeting larger family-size models in the market segment above. There's no point, though, in starting a trend if you're not prepared to develop it. And in the face of increasing competition, this car needed to evolve. It has. In answer to crossover rivals that are more spacious inside and claim to be cleverer and more efficient, Nissan has given its second bestseller a bigger boot, a far more competitive, affordable petrol option, and a dose of cutting-edge media and safety tech, all without appreciably diluting this car's strong value proposition, or creating an appreciably different product. If you liked the Juke before, you'll love it even more now. If, though, it was a little extrovert for you in its original form, it still won't be to your taste, and you'll probably want something similar that's a little more restrained. Maybe, say, a Peugeot 2008 or perhaps a Skoda Yeti. A Juke is different. Very different, in fact, if you choose all the trendy personalisation options now on offer. In fact, its whole success is founded on just that, being refreshingly different. According to Nissan, this car remains a unique blend of 4x4 and sports car, a macho alternative to a Super Mini for youthful urban motorists. Roomy yet compact, robust yet dynamic, and practical yet playful. It remains an unusual proposition with an appeal that extends beyond the small crossover segment and also attracts the kind of buyers who might otherwise consider trendy small runabouts like Fiat's 500, Vauxhall's Adam and the Mini Hatch. Juke buyers think that this car makes urban trinkets like those look rather dull and compromised. It's an original in every sense.